Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the channel. My name is Sky, and today I'm going to be giving you all the knowledge that I have learned using the Rapier. This guide is going to include talent builds for PvP, leveling, and dungeons, where you should be spending your attribute points, weapon pairings, gems, perks, and finally, some super important advanced tips, combos, and one-shot potentials. Let's cut to the chase and begin with the talent builds. Okay, so everyone, one thing to note about the Rapier is that it is a very skill rewarding weapon. It is very powerful in the hands of someone that is very skilled with it, and they know what they're doing. They know when to damage, they know when to leave, they know when to evade properly, evading back or side to side or even forward. You know, knowing when to be on the attack, when to be on the defense, and countering at the right times makes a good Rapier player and a not so good one. So let's start off with a basic leveling build. So early on, we're going to grab Flurry for the damage because Rapier early on is very weak and it doesn't really come online until about 11-12 points into it. So we're going to grab Flurry for the damage early on. We're going to grab Controlled Breathing for the 3 stamina on any hit. We're going to grab Riposte, which is a defensive stance that if you are struck, you counter it and instantly damage them back and also stun them for maybe potential setups. And we're going to grab Flesh for leaving the ground, lunging forward a set amount of meters, and doing an AoE spin through the target, which is very powerful for helping you AoE as well as mobility. After that, we're going to grab Quick Lunge, which killing with this ability reduces the cooldown by 80%. Now, it's important to know that this activates even when you use the Interruption talent later on, so we'll talk about that as well. After we grab that, we're going to grab Backside, which after performing Flesh, your next critical strike will have its damage increased by 15%. And you may be wondering, why would I grab this talent that doesn't even seem that good? What if I don't get a crit in 5 seconds? I'll tell you why right now. You're going to get Interruption. Pressing a light attack anytime during Flesh will stop the animation and perform a quick lunge static attack. So the idea and what their design point was of Flesh would be that you dash through the target, you instantly turn your camera 180 degrees to face them directly in the back, and you use Interruption for a light attack right into the back of them. So using Interruption and Backside together is a beautiful combo, and it is very effective for killing mobs and players. After we grab these, we're going to work on our Riposte talents. Insult to Injury, which makes you uninterruptible for 3 seconds after triggering a stun. We're going to grab Priority for cooldown reduction when you land a Riposte stun as well. And then we're going to grab the increased duration of the Riposte stun for, you know, setting up combos either with your musket or your bow or your spear to really bother people and give them no chance at stopping the setup you're about to do. So after this, you have 1 point left until we're going to respec into our fleshed out leveling build. So I mean, it's really a personal preference. I mean, I would grab the critical strikes reduces all cooldowns, so you know, cast abilities more. But now you're at the point where you have 10 points invested, and you're ready to invest another point. We're going to take out Flurry. We're going to get rid of all of these talents. We're going to work on Evade, Riposte, and Flesh. These 3 abilities together for leveling PvP are a match made in heaven. They're so powerful all together. It can make you almost unstoppable if used properly. So we're going to grab Evade and we're going to rush down into Crescendo. We're going to grab Breathe In for the stamina on use. We're going to grab Allegro for the 20% movement speed. And we're also going to grab Adagio. Let me know how it's pronounced in the comments. Evading forward grants 15% increased damage on your next light attack, ends after 1 second or landing the hit. So what you do is you evade forward, so you lunge forward into a quick instant light attack for 15% additional damage, and then we're grabbing Crescendo. Individual successful light attacks reduces the cooldown of this ability by 30%. Grabbing this right here increases your DPS by double. After Crescendo, we're going to finish out the Flesh tree, and we're grabbing Momentum, an incredible passive that every time you use one of your abilities, it increases the damage of your next light or heavy attack by 25%. This also works in unison with things like Adagio, which evading forward increases damage by 15%, and it also works in unison with Backside. After performing Flesh, your next critical strike have its damage increased by 15%. So both of these work so well with momentum and start really fleshing out the Grace Tree. And now we really got the ball rolling. You can have almost zero downtime on mob killing if using these abilities properly. After we finish that, we're going to grab Insult to Injury, Priority for the CDR, and the stun duration with lasting consequence. Now, at this point, you're weapon level 15 or 14, and, you know, from a personal preference standpoint, I like having the critical strikes reduces cooldowns by 5%. I want to use my abilities more so I can get more out of momentum. I want to also grab Desperation for the 10% flat increased damage when your stamina is low. I'm for sure going to pick up On Guard for 10% more damage when your target has greater than 50% health. So this is your basic leveling build, and you know, the Rapier starts off weak early, that's why you have to grab Flurry to make up for that, and then swapping toward the you know, evade talents, it makes you a lot more powerful. Now, the PvP build is going to look almost identical to the leveling build eventually, because these three abilities in PvP are incredibly powerful. Now, as you can see, all these abilities in unison in PvP are incredibly powerful, and I just can't suggest passing any of these up. Evade and Flesh combos with using Backside can chunk people to death, and you're so mobile, you're so good at countering, you're so good at tagging people. It's very hard for people to even get a hold of you, especially if you're using light armor. So if you're using a spear build with this, I wouldn't recommend full Grace. I would recommend, you know, instead of Flesh, I would grab, you know, Tondo, and then, you know, increase bleed damage as well as the cooldown reduction on Thirst for Blood. Just because getting both bleeds up on them with the spear as well as the Rapier, you could really mess with people's heads and force them to do something stupid before they bleed out. So it's very powerful. I definitely recommend keeping Riposte. It is one of the most powerful abilities in the whole game. If used right, you can decimate people. Now, to move on with a PvE dungeon build, you know, let's say you're in the later game. This isn't really recommended for early levels. It doesn't really come online until way later down the line, until you have blood almost completely fleshed out. But I'll help you out with, let's just say you're at Amarine Expedition. At that point, you're about level 24 to level 27-ish, and your mastery points should be at about 10 to 12. So let's start off with that. Immediately, we're going to grab Tondo, which is a quick strike dealing weapon damage that stacks up to 3 times. It's not 100%, by the way. It's 80%, so keep note of that. We're going to grab Flurry for the great damage. And then we're going to grab Flourish and Finish, where Flourish performs an attack knocking enemies back. And then if you hit a light attack after the animation of it knocking them back, you lunge forward and consume all the bleeds on Tondo. So if Tondo has 3 stacks of bleeds, it's going to consume 3 stacks of Tondo's bleeds and deal an immense amount of damage. After we grab these 3 abilities, we're going to work on cooldown reduction. Cooldown reduction is so important for this build because you want to use your abilities as much as possible, as fast as possible. So we're going to work on Thirst of Blood for reduced cooldown by 10% if they don't have a bleed stack on them. We're going to go down the Flurry tree, grab Fleeting Strikes for the cooldown reduction on Flurry. We're going to grab On Guard, which is 10% more damage for targets that have greater than 50% health. So on boss fights, you're dealing 10% more damage half the fight. Grab that. It makes it so worth it for fighting bosses. And using this build, you know, using bleeds and Flurry on cooldown, as well as having 10% more damage, it is so powerful. After we grab those, we're at 7 points. So we're going to start moving down Flourish and Finish to grab Bloody End. We're going to grab with Flare to gain Grit, Swagger for the stamina, Fuel for the tick of the damage with Tondo's bleeds, and now we're at the perfect point to where we can grab Bloody End. Finish deals 150% of the Rapier's bleed damage instead of 110%. So that's an additional 40% damage on your Flourish and Finish on the 3 stacks of Tondo. So consuming 3 stacks of Tondo deals 150% of 240% weapon damage. So the damage can be high on these abilities in unison. Would definitely consider picking up 5% more damage with a Rapier bleed, and reducing cooldowns by 1% on hits so you can use more Tondo stacks, and then more Tondo stacks mean more big flourish and finish hits. And then at this point, it's really personal preference of what you want first. 8% damage on the light attacks is really strong. Each hit of flurry extends the Rapier's bleeds. That's really good, heavy puncture. These are all good talents. You'll eventually just fill them out. But this is your main abilities that you want to rush first that are very, very powerful, and you could put some serious burst on a boss. What you can also do is use Tondo and Flurry on cooldown and then swap to your other weapon if you want, If you're running a spear, like a double melee, you can put your spear's bleeds on them as well, and then swap back to Rapier and try to finish up those Tondo stacks and get out as many flourish and finishes as possible. It really depends on your playstyle and if the Rapier in the dungeon is going to be your main source of damage. Single target, it is incredibly high. If you're focusing on, multiple adds at once, you want to spread your bleeds as much as possible and try to hit as many of them with Flurry as possible. So that's something to keep note of. So that's it for the Rapier, leveling guide, PvP guide, and dungeon guide. Now let's move on to some attributes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so we're in the attributes panel. One thing you have to note is this entirely depends on your weapon setup. What I'm doing is I'm rushing 200 dexterity. I'm going to grab that backstab and headshot damage for increasing both of my musket and rapier damage immensely. And then I'm going to start working on my intelligence, for the damage to light and heavy attacks, and also 10% to critical hit damage eventually. It's very, very powerful. This is just the basic, dex intelligence build for Rapier Musket. If you have an Ice Gauntlet, for example, I would recommend almost going full intelligence. I haven't done too much research on the Ice Gauntlet and pairing it with the Rapier, but if your Spear and Rapier, which is also a very good melee heavy comp, I would suggest minimum grabbing 50 Constitution for the health consumables are 20% stronger, and then I would go full dexterity. Being able to have full dexterity with your Rapier and Spear is going to make you deal a ton of damage, and having the 50 points in Constitution makes you a little bit tankier, and your potion's a lot stronger. So if you're going for the bow and Rapier, I would recommend going, mostly dexterity and at least the first tier of Constitution, because the bow is more of a mid-range weapon rather than the musket is a long range. So you're going to be seeing melee fights a lot more often. If you are going the musket and rapier, I would recommend going full dexterity, because you're going to be in the way back line a lot more. And then just in the, the slight case that someone does finally get to you, you can counter them with all the rapier has to offer and get the heck out of there. So that's what I recommend for, with just the basic weapons of using the rapier. I know some people use fire staff. It's really the same case as Ice Gauntlet, stat distribution wise. So that's really something to watch out for. Now let's move on to a very interesting part, the gems and the perks. So guys, when we're talking about perks for the Rapier, it really depends on if you're going to be PvP heavy or PvE heavy. So if you're going to be doing a lot of PvE, I would recommend grabbing Enchanted. I'm going to post it up right here. It's a flat percentage damage to all your light attacks and heavy attacks. So it's very, very powerful for just flat damage increase. I would also recommend Keenly Jagged for a damage over time when you critically strike. That paired with, Tondo and, the bleed damage that gives in general. There's also things like Rogue. I'll post it up right here. I can't really find it right now, but it increases your damage when you're hitting them from behind. These are all things to think about in PvE to increase your damage immensely, mostly to like bosses and, simple adds or mobs in a dungeon. Now, for PvP, I would recommend something like Keenly Empowered. I think this is what it's called. I'm going to post it right here. A flat percentage damage increase after you critically strike. And, with the Rapier, you're going to be critting a lot, and you're going to be moving around the target as fast as possible, getting flesh backstab combos. So you're going to have a lot of percentage damage increase a lot of the time. I would also recommend omnidirectional evade. So when you evade, it uses the lunge forward talent on even evading from side to side. That's pretty good. I would also recommend using Sundering Riposte. So when you riposte somebody and it hits them with the stun, it makes their defenses lower by a flat percentage amount as well. Now with gems on the Rapier, I prefer using the Emerald, and the Emerald strictly for the execute damage. I mean, you can use things like Moonstone for increased damage while your health is low. That can be good at times. Or, you know, if you're an intellect build as well, you can also use one of the elemental gems, like the Topaz, the Ruby, you know, to have it scale off of intellect as well. So, I mean, if you're running the intellect build, I would recommend using, you know, like the Ruby or Topaz or whatever's better for you. And then if you're more of a physical based build, I would recommend using the Emerald. I wouldn't really recommend using the Moonstone because, you know, once you're low health, you're going to get the heck out of there anyway. So I would recommend using the Emerald for sure. The Emerald also works really, really well in PvE against bosses. So you also get the talent that increases your damage by 10% above 50%. And then you also have the execute damage for 20% additional damage with targets less than 30%. So throughout about 80% of the fight, you're dealing increased amount of damage, which is very powerful together. So those are the gems right there. Let's move on to some tips and tricks, as well as some combos, and maybe even a one-shot. Let's see it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, to start off with this first tip is that you can cancel any animation you're doing with evade. So let me show you an example. We want to riposte. We want to obviously wait, and then you can cancel it instantly with an evade. You can hold, cancel, and you can really play some mind games with people. Like you can hold it down, cancel, instantly do something else, and psych them out pretty bad. There's a lot of animation cancelers you can do. I'll show you the repost one again right now. So I can repost. If it doesn't land, I can immediately cancel it to get off a couple attacks and then maybe dodge out of there. So just play some mind games with people and figure out what their consistencies are. So the next combo here is, it's not really a combo, it's known, but it's just how to perform it. It's using flesh to perform a backstab combo. So to start, we'll, you know, start hitting this wolf here, and, you know, he'll miss, whatever, but I could flesh, instantly turn around, and get backstab off. I'll show you again in a second. So the idea is, you know, flesh, instantly rotate the camera, and backstab them to get... And what you're doing is you're making use of two things. Number one, after performing flesh, your next critical strike has its damage increased by 15%, so you crit from being behind them. And then you're also making use of momentum, 25% increased damage on your next light attack after performing ability. So you have 40% increased damage on that combo, and if you land it properly, you can deal good damage. So another tip is using riposte into whatever combo that you want. You don't have to riposte into a heavy attack. You can do anything. For example, I'll do it right here on this wolf. We're gonna riposte into a trap combo, and then I can back off, shoot again. So it can set up a lot of different things. If you're using the spear, you could, you know, riposte them, get off a heavy attack, and leg sweep, and start a really good CC chain. So for example, again, what you can do is, you know, wait for the target to attack, and then you can either do a heavy attack into an evade lunge forward for some big burst. That's another combo as well. So really with the riposte, you want to get as creative as you want. You know, use your abilities to, you know, their maximum efficiency. If he's going to hit me, I can riposte it, heavy attack, evade, lunge forward, backstab. I can play with it as much as I want, and I have free range to be as creative as you want. So let's say you have an ice gauntlet, maybe riposte and then hit them with a glacial spike into a ice storm. If you have the fire staff, you know, maybe land a fireball on them into a, you know, the rush ability. You know, just get creative. Another tip that I don't see a lot of Rapier players actually use is using evade instead of roll to dodge attacks. So for example, we'll tag this wolf right here, not do that. And what you could do is you could sidestep attacks. See, I dodged the first one. See, using Evade as a defensive, offensive, and utility ability can change everything. Okay, so lastly, for the last round of tips for the Rapier, we're going to do my favorite combo to do if I think I have kill potential. What I'm going to do is, you know, invest all my abilities on the offensive. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so here's the combo in full effect. You're going to start with the riposte. Immediately after, you're going to hit them with a heavy attack into an immediate flash, rotate the camera, landing the backstab into a quick lunge, basic attack, double attack. Now, I've only pulled this off a handful of times because it's not easy to do unless you're fighting melee. And we're making sure we're utilizing our momentum passive as much as possible. So right there is my favorite one-shot combo to use. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, this is the ultimate beginner's guide to the Rapier. You know, weapon combos, leveling, PvP and PvE builds, you know, gems, you know, perks, everything like that to get started and really dive deep into it and sink your teeth in this amazing, amazing skill-based weapon. It's so fun to use and so fun to make people look ridiculous with it. I am in love with it. So if you guys got anything out of this, let me know below. If you guys have any tips for me, let me know below. I would, you know, love to learn as much as I can. My name is Sky from the Comeback Kids. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.